They called him 8901, and 8901 had learned not to dream because dreaming cost him. The cell was a white cube with no corners that he could find. He had measured it with his body 1,000 times, 6 lengths of himself one way, 6 the other, and every time the count came out the same, and every time he distrusted it. The Vern who kept him were patient creatures. They had taught him patience the way you teach a thing by removing every alternative to it. But the dreams came anyway. They came when the white light dimmed for what the Vern called rest, and what 8901 called the long part. A woman's hands, brown and quick, braiding a child's hair. A window with rain on it. A kitchen that smelled of burned bread and someone laughing about the burned bread instead of being angry. A small voice saying a word he could never hold onto when he woke. A word that started soft and ended sharp. A name maybe. His name or the child's name or the name of the thing he had been before he was a number. He did not tell the Vern about the dreams. He had told them once early when he still believed telling them things would help. The next morning the white room had smelled of antiseptic and his head had felt scraped, and the dreams had gone quiet for a long time, and when they came back thinner, like a signal through water. So now he kept them. He held them under his tongue like a stone. The Vern who supervised him most was called Brinster, though that was 8901's word for the sound it made, not its name. Brinster had a face like wet slate and 4 eyes arranged in a slow vertical column, and when it studied him with the patience of someone reading the last page of a book they already knew the ending of. There was another one, taller, that the lab deferred to. 8901 thought of that one as Senner. Senner did not study him. Senner appraised him, which was different, the way a man appraises a tool he is deciding whether to keep or melt down. "You are valuable, 8901, Brinster told him once in the flat assembled human it used. Your kind adapts. We are documenting the adaptation. You should feel it paused, searching its borrowed vocabulary, proud. 8901 had said nothing, but he had thought, you do not document a thing you respect. You document a thing you intend to replace. The tests were the architecture of his days. They put him in rooms and changed the rooms. They lowered the air until his lungs burned and recorded how long before he learned to slow his own heart. They gave him a puzzle of light and pain and recorded the exact moment he stopped solving it for them and started solving it for himself. They were not cruel, exactly. Cruelty would have implied he was a person being wronged. To the Vern, he was a process being observed, and the observation was the whole of the relationship. What they did not record, what he was careful they did not record, was that he was learning the lab. He learned it the way the dreams had taught him to learn things, in fragments, holding each one under his tongue. The corridor outside the test chamber turned left, always left, and the left turn meant the Vern had built the place to herd, and a thing built to herd has a slaughter end and an open end. He learned that the white light flickered very slightly in the 8th interval after rest, and that the flicker meant a power cycle, and that a power cycle meant a door somewhere was, for the length of one held breath, only a suggestion of a door. He learned that the Vern could not smell fear. Their slate faces had no nose he could find. So when they ran the test where the floor fell away and he had to hang by his fingers over a dark he could not measure, he let his face do whatever it wanted and kept his hands honest, and they wrote down honest hands and missed the rest of him entirely. And he learned from 100 small tells that they were going to wipe him again. Soon, Brinster had begun to speak of him in a tense that did not include tomorrow. He ran on the day of the falling floor. It was the 8th interval after rest. The light flickered. They had the floor open under him, the dark mouth of it, and Brinster stood at the chamber edge with its slow column of eyes, and Senner stood behind Brinster the way a verdict stands behind a judge. 8901 hung by his fingers the way they wanted. He let his face be empty. Then he did the thing they had not built a column on their charts for. Instead of climbing back up to the lip where they waited, he swung, once, twice, gathering it, and let go into the dark. He had measured the dark. 6 lengths of himself the puzzle of light had taught him when he stopped solving it for them. He fell 3 and landed on a maintenance gantry he had bet his life existed, and the bet came in and then he was running, and behind him he heard the Vern make a sound he had never heard them make. It was not anger. It was the sound of a chart being wrong. He ran left because left was the hurting way, and this was the whole of it. This was the human thing. The thing no test had drilled out of him. He stopped. And he turned. And he ran right instead into the slaughter end, because the slaughter end was the end they would not expect a herded thing to choose. The right-hand corridor ended in a door that the power flicker had made into a suggestion. He put his shoulder through the suggestion. Cold air met him. Cold air and the smell of rain on a window, and he was outside. And outside was a gray scrubland under a sky with too many moons, and somewhere under his tongue the stone of a half-remembered word went hot. The 2 old humans found him before the Vern did. They had a low house dug into a fold of the scrub, a place the lab's herding logic had no column for, and the old man brought him in over the old woman's worrying and put him by a fire that smelled. And 8901 stopped in the doorway of himself when he understood it, that smelled of burned bread. "Easy, son," the old man said. "Easy, you're one of theirs, the skin tells. They thin the skin when they keep you." The old woman brought him water. Her hands were brown and quick. She did not braid anything, there was nothing to braid, but her hands moved the way the hands in the dream moved, and 8901 sat very still so the feeling would not notice him and leave. They were called Mara and Tomas. They had lost a son to the Vern, they said, a long count of years ago, a soldier, taken in the surrender years, processed into the lab and never returned. They had stopped expecting him. They told 8901 this gently, the way you tell a stranger a grief, because that is all he was to them, a stranger by their fire with thinned skin. They did not know him. He understood that fully, and it did not break him, because he did not know him either. The lab had wiped the son out of the soldier and the soldier out of the man. And what sat by their fire was the third thing, the rebuilt thing, 8901. Mara looked at his face the way you look at a word you almost recognize. Then she looked away, because almost is a country with no roads in it, and she had been there before. But the burned bread, he held the burned bread under his tongue with the rest. Harry came on the second night. He came the way the Verns herded things learned to move, low and along the walls, and he stood in the firelight and looked at 8901 with a face that had a name behind it 8901 could not reach. "They told me you were dead," Harry said. 8901. "They told the rest of us you tested into the dark and didn't test out. I'm here because I didn't believe them, and because somebody in that lab should know who you were before they scrape it off you a second time." 8901's hands wanted to be honest. He let them be still instead. "You were a soldier," Harry said. "Before, you had a wife. You had a girl, a daughter, 6 years old when they took you. She'd be grown now if she's anything. You used to talk about her in the cell before the second wipe, before you stopped being able to. You used to hum a thing. Your mother sang it. You said your mother sang it over burned bread because she'd rather laugh than waste the morning being sorry." The old woman, across the fire, went very still. "They keep your kind," Harry said, "because you adapt. That's the word they use. But that's not the word for it. Adapting is what a thing does to survive. What we do is we keep the small things. Through the wipes, under the wipes. They scrape off the soldier and the husband and the father, and they think they've got you down to a clean process, and the process hums its mother's tune over an alien fire and doesn't even know why. That's the thing they can't chart, 8901. That's the thing they're trying to find and cut out, and they can't, because they don't have a tool small enough." 8901 looked at the fire, and under his tongue the stone went hot, and the half-word came up the way a name comes up, soft start and sharp end, and he did not say it out loud. He held it, but he knew now it was a name, and he knew it was the girl's, and he knew that the lab had taken a man and made a number, and the number had carried the girl's name out of the white room without ever once being able to read it. The Vern came an hour before dawn. They came the way they always came, patient, certain, a chart walking on legs, Brinster at the front, center behind. A handful of the herding kind fanned out across the scrub with light throwers that drew lines you did not want to be standing in. 8901 went out to them alone, because Mara and Tomas were in the house, and the house was a fold the chart had no column for, and he wanted it kept that way. 8901, Brinster said. You have produced excellent data. The escape itself was valuable. You will return now. We will document the adaptation, and then we will reset you, and the cycle will continue, and you should, the pause, the borrowed word, feel proud. My name, 8901 said, is not 8901. Brinster's column of eyes did not change. Your designation. I know what you keep me for. He kept his voice level. The lab had taught him level. You keep me because I adapt. You've been writing it down for years. You think it's a process. You think if you watch it long enough you'll see the trick of it and you'll be able to do it yourselves or build it or sell it. That's why you wipe us. You're not erasing us. You're trying to catch the thing in the act of surviving the erasure. Center moved then. The first time 8901 had ever seen Center move with anything like interest. And you can't, 8901 said. You can't catch it, because it isn't in the part you can wipe. You scrape and you get all the way down to number, and you think the number is the floor. It isn't the floor. There's a thing under the number, and the thing under the number hums its mother's tune, and you have never once heard it because it doesn't make a sound on your charts. This is sentiment, Brinster said. Sentiment is a documented inefficiency in your species. It's the engine, said 8901. You've been calling the engine an inefficiency for the whole war. That's why you're losing it. He had learned the lab. He wanted to be clear about that after, when he told it to himself in the long part of the nights that came later. He did not win because he was strong. The Vern were stronger. He did not win because of a weapon. He had no weapon. He won because for 2 years a number had measured a white room with its own body and held every measurement under its tongue, and a herded thing that has measured the slaughterhouse knows where the slaughterhouse keeps its own throat. He had told Harry on the second night the one thing he was certain of. The lab ran on a power cycle. The cycle flickered every 8th interval, and a thing that flickers is a thing that can be made to stop. If you know which suggestion of a door to put your shoulder through, and if someone is standing at the right place at the right held breath to do it. Harry was inside the lab now, had gone back in, low and along the walls, while 8901 walked out to the Vern alone and kept their slow column of eyes pointed at the wrong fold of the scrub. 8901 looked up, past Brinster, at the white shape of the lab on its rise, and he began, very quietly, to hum. It was a small tune. It started soft and ended sharp. His mother had sung it over burned bread because she would rather laugh than waste a morning being sorry, and a soldier had carried it into a cell, and a number had carried it out of a wipe without knowing its name, and now a man stood in alien scrub and gave it back to the morning on purpose. Brinster's eyes shifted, all four trying to chart the sound. The lab flickered. 8901 had counted the intervals since rest the way he had counted everything, under his tongue, honest. 8th interval. The power cycle. The held breath in which a door was only a suggestion, and somewhere in the white cube Harry put his shoulder through the suggestion 8901 had described to him down to the smell of it, and fed the cycle the thing it could not survive. The lab did not explode. That would have been a Vern kind of ending, large and charted. It simply went dark, every white light in it all at once, the way a held breath ends. And the herding kind out in the scrub, whose light throwers drew their lines from the lab cycle, found their lines gone and stood in the gray dawn suddenly only as strong as their bodies, which was not very. Brinster turned its slow column of eyes back to 8901. For the first time, there was something in them that was not patience. It was the look of a creature reading the last page of a book and finding a different ending printed there. "You will be reset," it said, but the certainty had gone thin, like a signal through water. "You can't reset a tune," said 8901. "You've never been able to, that's the whole report. Write it down." But they did not take him back. There was a fight, brief and ugly and human in the gray light, and the Vern lost it the way a chart loses to weather. And afterward 8901 stood in the scrub and breathed cold air that no one was measuring and watched the dark lab and did not feel proud, because proud was Brinster's word. He felt something the Vern had no column for. He felt returned. Mara and Tomas came out of the fold of the house when the light throwers went quiet. The old woman crossed the scrub to him, and she stopped an arm's length away, and she looked at his face the way you look at a word. He was still humming. He had not noticed he was still humming. The old woman's quick brown hands came up and stopped over her mouth, and her eyes did the thing eyes do when almost finally finds a road, and she said the half-word, the soft-start sharpened word, and it was not the daughter's name after all. It was his. It had been his the whole time. The lab had wiped a man down to a number, and the number had carried his own name out under his tongue and never once been able to read it. And it took his mother, humming the rest of the tune back at him over a cold morning, to finish the word the wipe had broken. He did not become the soldier again. That man was gone. The Vern had at least been honest about that. He did not become the husband, or all at once the father. Those were roads he would have to walk back down slowly, and some of them would have no one on the other end. But he stopped being 8901. He stood in the scrub with his mother's tune in his mouth and his mother's word for him in his ears, and the lab dark behind him, and the war still out there, vast and patient and certain, and entirely, fatally wrong about what the smallest human thing could carry through the dark. He had been a process they were documenting. He turned out to be the part of the report they could never finish.